Ever wondered what it truly takes to succeed in specific jobs around Signature? Well, you're about to find out. From software engineering to talent acquisition, we're here to spotlight real-life paths to success. Welcome to On the Job With, your window into career pathing and discovering what it takes to excel in roles all around our organization. Your host and Signature Edge producer Addison is diving deep into the heart of career exploration and hearing personal experiences from people's journeys to career excellence. You can only know what's possible when you hear what the job really is directly from those getting it done. So, if you're ready to focus on career pathing and discover the steps that led our guests to where they are now, buckle up and tune in to On the Job With.
Hello, listeners, and hello, Signature. This is Addison Stoddard again. I'm here for our latest edition of On the Job With, and I have one of the brightest stars at Signature with me right now, Dee Vesta. Dee Vesta is one of our medical coders, and I'm so excited to have her on the show. Dee, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Of course. Yeah, we are so excited to have you today. You occupy a very interesting position here as one of our medical coders, sort of a really on the ground position when it comes to making sure that, the healthcare administration and billing aspect of what we do here actually gets taken care of between payers and providers. So, Dee, let's just get right into it. I always ask people, how would you explain your position? Imagine you were going to a high school career fair or a bring your parent to class sort of situation.
It's kind of what I usually start out with telling people is like, you ever been to the doctor and you get a bill? Well, I'm part of that process. So it's basically coding is an alphanumeric number associated with services provided to a patient. And it's not just your general practitioner or your pediatrician. It can be a whole slew of people like the lab technician, your respiratory therapist, a specialist, your dentist. They all bill for their services. And in order to bill for their services, they have to have a diagnosis code and a procedure code if they did a procedure. And I assign those codes. So it can be not boring at all. It can be interesting at times, especially if you're coding for a trauma center like I am right now.
I am sure you see all sorts of wild and dramatic codes for a trauma center, traumatic codes. That's really important work, especially considering the need for clarification on what procedures or work might have been performed with a patient. So thank you very much for that. What does a typical day look like for a medical coder? Or is there like daily, weekly, quarterly things you're checking in on regularly?
If we can't get to and complete a particular encounter, we put them on hold. And we have to check those pretty regularly, like pretty much every day, to look if the doctor has, if it was for documentation or if it was waiting for a report to be finished, that type thing. So that's a big component of working every day, is looking for that, checking your email, making sure, for one, did Christine talk to me today? Does she need me? And I've got to check email. I got to check Teams to see if I have missed calls and missed chats. So that's pretty much it. Other than working every day, I tell my husband and my daughter goodbye, have a good day. I go upstairs. I have a separate office, so I have doors that I can shut, so nobody can get in and nobody can bother me, especially when they're home and I don't have the day off like Monday. That was fun. I usually have to have the door shut because, they have a normal life. They have the day off. I do not. So, you got to keep it going. But I will work. There's a certain point, like 9 o'clock, I got to have coffee. And I'm going to take coffee. I'm going to get my coffee and come back. But I usually work. Unfortunately, I take my lunch at my desk. I mean, it's not like I'm going to go out to eat. I'm not going out and eating. So, that sandwich is going to be eaten in front of in front of the computer. But like I said earlier, when you're in the middle of a chart, you don't want to stop until you completed it. And I have been known to have been in a good trauma chart and it take me 2-3 hours. And then I'm looking down at the clock going, oh, I was supposed to go get my daughter 20 minutes ago. So it goes fast. Your day goes fast. If it's a good day and you have some good charts, your day goes fast.
How do you find success in your role?
Well, success kind of depends, I believe, on the individual. I know when I first started working for Signature quite a number of years ago, I was in the process of receiving my coding credential, which I had not received before, even though that's my field. I had a 4-year degree, which is what they call their RHIA with the HEMA organization. And so when I started looking for other positions, I was like, okay, this coding credential is a necessity. It's going to help me. So I sat for the test after having been out of school for a number of years and was very happy and satisfied that I passed it the first try. But in my job specifically, getting the quarterly incentive each year or each quarter, that is like my goal. And that signifies that I've coded accurately, I've reached my productivity, I'm not doing anything crazy, I'm dependable. And to me, that's like the benchmark of what I would consider being accomplished. It's not much, but to me, it is.
You talked about receiving that incentive. I know Signature has really high standards. I mean, that's obviously very important for what we do. Could you talk a little bit more about like what it takes to meet that incentive at Signature?
Pretty much the first thing is like productivity. You need to meet the basic minimum productivity. And for inpatient and outpatient, professional fee coding and all that, it's different. Then you also have to meet the accuracy. So when we have our audits every month, we have to meet a minimum. And if I'm remembering right, Signatures is 97% accuracy. And that's pretty good. That's pretty good because not very many companies, coders can do that.
And you know, it's funny that you say that because in a previous role at Signature, I did a little bit of marketing and coding, or a little bit of marketing for coding when it came to like the ICD-10 rollout, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. Yeah, later in the interview. That is a beast, was a beast. But I remember that was some pretty big selling points for us, that 97 or 98% accuracy we were requiring and reaching from our coders. Not to speak for competitors or anybody else, but sometimes that accuracy can be quite a bit lower than what Signature requires. So, and to be honest, that is the gap Signature fills because we do it so well, and that's what makes you a superstar. So, as you said, you strive to hit those performance metrics every quarter, just to know that you're being successful in your role. In the larger picture, how does what you do fit into your sense of self?
I think I'm not a perfectionist by nature, but I am one that likes to please everyone. And it bothers me greatly if I think someone is disappointed. So if I don't meet certain stats for myself, then I feel bad. Like I try to meet a certain productivity every day. And then when I do meet it, it's hunky dory. The next day, I may not even meet half of what I did the day before. And then you're like, oh my God. But you got to realize it's over a week. It's over a week and it's averaged. So I think about average, I meet mine. So I feel pretty self-confident. I feel like I'm accomplished in what I'm doing and that hopefully that I'm not disappointing anybody. I'm certainly not disappointing myself. That's to me, that's kind of where that's coming from.
I think you holding yourself to a higher standard is very important and like exemplary of what we're really looking for and finding a lot of our staff here at Signature. So, I mean, to carry that with you in everything you do, and then just also have like self-assurance to know that like you're going to have great days. You might have a little below average day, but it's all going to average out over the week if you just put the work in. I think that's a big lesson that I think our listeners can take in. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And for you, it's a weekly marathon and then a quarter marathon. So I love that. You mentioned earlier about sitting for the test and stuff. So I mean, you've gone through a bit of a evolution in your own job. How has your understanding of success in your role changed over the different stages of your career, from the beginning to sitting for the 4-year degree to sitting for certifications to where you are now?
Well, when I first started out and I got the degree and I had to sit for a major test for the credential too for the RHIA, and that was a all day test. It was traumatic. I did pass it the first time, which is, oh, thank goodness, because I don't know if I could have handled taking that one again. But it left me with being cocky. I was cocky. I wasn't really all that young. I was in my late 20s when I sat for it. So I felt pretty cocky and I approached my job that way. I started working initially for the VA, and they had just started their coding program. So I'm like, I'm coming in, I'm fresh blood. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to help you out. And I quickly realized I didn't know a whole lot about nothing. So, that cockiness had to be humbled. And I think now when I look at it, I worked for a company who had absolutely no, in my opinion, had no regard for their employees. And I worked for them for 10 years because I considered loyalty, because I did that with the Marine Corps, I did that with the VA, went with the highs and the lows. And it took me not getting work to look for another position. And so I had to step back and look and go, hey, I'm worth this. I'm worth my salt, and I'm going to approach it that way. And I had to open myself up to criticism, which is pretty hard for some people. At first, you kind of feel like you're insulted. I'll give it that. You feel insulted, but then you move on, and then you realize, okay, you can be wrong and it's okay. Just keep moving on, keep growing, and be open to anything and everything.
I love that openness and I love that growth. I think that's a really good story. It sounds like you had career changes and growth to where you are now. So to anybody listening, I think what Dee just said is really very powerful in terms of be open to criticism, be open to change, be open to hearing critiques or what you could do better, or maybe hearing people tell you what you might be best at or how to improve yourself that you might not have been thinking of personally. So we were just talking about ICD-10. I was about to ask you, how do you see the future of your profession evolving? But I want to go back in time. Can we just talk about ICD-10? I know it's been out for
Lord.
I know it's been out for a minute, but
Yeah.
I had a friend actually that's in nursing, and she was talking about something, and people sometimes don't know what I do. They just think I'm in marketing or digital production, and she started talking about these codes, and I'm so versed in what ICD-10 is, maybe not all of the codes, but I know what it is. And she's like, how do you know that? And I'm like, it's a huge piece of our healthcare system is to know these codes. So sorry, just to set the scene a little bit, to go back, ICD-10 was the new rollout, gosh, 8, 9, if not 10 years ago, Dee, at this point in time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it hugely increased the number of medical codes able to clarify what was happening in a medical event. And you're the expert, but I'm the one talking here. It's like, I remember reading some of the stats where it's like, it went from a code for you broke your arm to like, now there's a dozen codes to tell you how far up the arm broke. Like that,
exactly.
like that sort of stuff. Can you talk to a little bit to our listeners about how coding has changed in the last 10 years with the rollout of ICD-10?
Well, when we first started, well, it's been rumored for a very long time, but it was funny how people, the HIM world was approaching their physicians, because they're the ones, their documentation is totally, our codes are totally reliant on what they document. You can't just say left arm now. Like you said, there's like so many places on a bone that can be broken, and how it can be broken, and what direction. It's just unreal. So educating the physicians on their documentation has always been a nightmare. But when ICD-10 came, it was even more so. And it's something you can't get away with. When they do ICD-11, I'm sure there's going to be challenges for them poor doctors too. So if you get them when they're young, like the residents that are just learning, their career will be far more satisfying, especially when they have coders and the coders are coming to them and saying, hey, that you said right the whole time in the note, but then in your diagnosis, the final diagnosis, you say left. So is it left or right? And they have to be humble enough to say, hey, I'm wrong. Let me change that.
On top of adding all these codes and being very specific about what injuries or medical events are happening, it also is actually helping transform healthcare and tracking. Beforehand, you might be talking about a bone break or something like that, and as I said, left arm broke, random basic code. But with ICD-10, there's so much more specificity that you can start drawing health trends and health outcomes out of some of this coding, that it's like, oh, we're so specific that we can tell like length of time to heal, like maybe trends and stuff that's based on, how we're documenting the specificity of what's happening to patients. So
it helps with the statistics overall. And a lot of people don't think about that, but research, they when they come to your hospital and say, I'm doing a research project, I need to learn more about your cardiovascular diseases and how you treat them, they don't look for cardiovascular disease. They look for the ICD-10 code and the ICD-10 codes for the procedures and the CPT codes for the procedures. So, I mean, if you don't have the accuracy of it, the conciseness of it, your statistics are going to be off. So is your hospital stats, and that's bad because then you get looked at by Medicare, and benchmarking is a pretty big thing for hospitals, and you want to be as close to being a representation of your facility, and I think ICD-10 has a very big part of that.
Yes, and as I said, your position, medical coders, are the crux of making sure that everything is documented properly. So, I mean, really, you perform a very important task. And just one final ICD-10 note that I always like, it's so specific that I believe one of the things we were always like making little infographics about was if you got bit by a dolphin or something, it would go into what kind of dolphin bit you. I mean, it was
Yeah.
yeah, it really hundreds, 100. Am I wrong? I think it's 140,000 codes or 160,000 codes in ICD-10.
I think so.
Yes.
To be honest, it change. Of course, it changes every year.
Yeah.
And it increased last year quite a bit.
Okay.
They found something new that they could just expand upon and add 10 codes for what was one. So yeah, it drills down and gets very specific, especially for injuries. And that's a big thing for like insurance companies, workers' comp and all that. That's pretty good that they've expanded the external, what we call an external cause code within ICD-10. And that just simply tells you how, when, and where.
You had mentioned the Marine Corps earlier in this interview. I'm sure that was very influential in your work ethic.
Oh yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about how your previous jobs have contributed to your approach to work?
I kind of touched on this one a little bit earlier. Like I had mentioned my loyalty in working for a company who totally undervalued their coders. But when I was in the Marine Corps, you didn't have a choice. You didn't have a choice. So I had to learn to watch and not speak. And so you have to learn patience. And you also learn that the greater and common good is more than you. And so you're just a small aspect of it. And, when you go into the actual working world outside of military, you may have an opinion. Marine Corps, I didn't have an opinion. The opinion was whatever my officer said. But now that I'm working for basically myself, I have an opinion, I have a value, and I slowly started to see that and would apply it. Like the first job, like I had said, when I was working for a contract company, it was a remote contract company. They did not give any overtime. They didn't give sick leave, no sick leave. And there was no leave period. They didn't, have any kind of benefits, especially like for retirement, medical. I didn't have health insurance. I had it with my husband, but they didn't offer it. So going from that to working for Signature, it was completely night and day. And when you work for somebody who values you, you tend to act differently. You tend to be more willing to put yourself out there and be better. I learned that, like I said, I have something to offer, and I'm not so cocky as I used to be. And that I know that I offer having a high worth ethic, loyal, dependable, I'm accurate, I'm productive. I tend to work well with other people. I tend to like people. Those are values that companies are looking for. And if you come in it with the aspect of, I'm the only one that's important, you're never going to get anywhere. You have to realize that you are a part of a greater good. You're just one little person in that. And I think that is regression of how somebody can look at their working life, because my daughter, for instance, she's like, this is how it's going to be. She's not even 17 yet. This is how it's going to be when I get out and I work. And I'm like, oh no. I was like, sweetheart, I'm trying to tell you, I'm trying to get this so you don't be humbled. But she have to learn just like I had to learn. Your willingness to change, I think, and the criticism, being willing to be criticized and to change your behavior is what's going to have the longevity.
You have to be moldable,
Yes.
especially when
Yes.
you're young. So all the best
Yes.
to your daughter.
Yeah.
So I've had some jobs that shaped me too, Dee. Like, so no, I totally understand that. And you actually said something really interesting in pre-interview that we went over before we recorded today. I really like that you said you knew you had more worth than to be mediocre. I
Yes.
think that's such a strong realization, is to just,
Yes.
realize your power, realize your abilities, realize what you can offer, what you can give back to people. So as you mentioned, being open to critique and having discussions with people, but that sort of goes both ways, or even laterally. We have quite a few medical coders at Signature. Some of them work for the same hospital, some of them work on projects overall, or just tied to the same program. How do you approach collaboration and teamwork within your role? And what do you find most rewarding about working with others?
I think for working on a team remotely, the one thing is to be patient. You have to learn patience. You have to learn to adapt. Um, it's not about you. Especially like we have coders that work on the West Coast, and I work on the East Coast, and you know that time difference is substantial. It's substantial when you want to have a meeting. But I also learned that when you work on team projects, there's extra effort on everybody's part. It's kind of like doing your team project in high school. If not everybody does their part, nobody, it fails. And that's very true for a working environment like ours. It's difficult, especially if they're relying on you for a very important part of it, an important piece of it, and you're not able to get to it for a little while for whatever reason. Being able to work with other people and not being able to see them, see their reactions, see their body language, you have to learn how to communicate in a totally different way. And that's hard because most people rely on somebody's body language and how they're reacting to what you're saying kind of dictates how they react and how they respond to you. And that's a big missing point with being a remote worker on a team. But I think the team's ability and the Zooms, that helps a lot more with that. But it's getting everybody on the same page and letting them realize your piece, we got to have your piece first. You got to do it so we can have our pieces going. You just got to learn how to, manage your time, manage your capabilities. You got to get one point, you probably have to say, hey, I can't do this. Relinquish the control to somebody else and realize, okay, I can't do this. And being okay with that and taking on a different role. I think it's difficult, but it is so rewarding. It is so rewarding when you've been set out with a specific task. You've accomplished that task and it was on time and it was, perfect or whatever. That is satisfying. And that goes to your self-esteem, your self-worth, your team's worth, and of course, your company that you're working for. They all benefit from it. The person who says, oh, I'm not going to work on a team, you're missing out. It's a very unique endeavor, and it's becoming more so now, especially when COVID hit. You're totally how you're reacting and communicating and writing and responding and all that is totally different now. I think we've gotten better at it, especially for team wise.
The Zoom, the work from home, the Teams chat.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, completely new language, completely new skill check.
Yeah.
That I think we're getting to the point where we're excelling at it. I think the teamwork aspect is going really well. Though I also like what you said about like sort of the delegation and the sharing the task.
Mm-hmm.
Like what I was thinking was a basketball team. You
Mm.
got to be comfortable passing the ball. Like,
Yes.
so
Yes.
you're not gonna make the basket. You're not gonna score the point. You're not gonna win the game if you're not comfortable with your team in passing the ball.
Yep.
So great insight on that one. Just talking about, problem solving and, how teamwork can really help with that, especially when you feel comfortable with the people you work with and know everybody's skill sets. Can you share a recent problem or challenge that you and or maybe your coding team together have been tasked with? And can you maybe tell the audience how you tackled it? Did you have to innovate? Did you have to adapt? And ultimately, did you achieve success?
Well, my supervisor, Miss Christine Howe, she is busy training new coders, and she had come to me and asked me, she goes, would you mind if some of these new coders have a question, can you answer them? And I was like, well, yeah, sure. I don't mind. I like to train. I thought for sure, I was like, oh, nobody's going to contact me. Within a couple of days, I got my first little pop up on Teams, and I'm like, oh, Lord. And I was in the middle of a trauma patient. And, it's hard. It's hard to say, okay, I got to stop. I got to put this on hold. So I had to learn time delegation, and I needed to answer her because she needed to have an answer so that she can complete her task and move on. So if I had put her off, she A would have try to go somewhere else, or B, not even, try to complete it herself and it not be right. That puts a kink in the overall plan for the team of coding for that day, especially if it's wrong and you got to go back and fix it. You're like, okay. So knowing that, it's better to stop what I'm doing and help this person so that they can move on, and then I can go back and do mine. I had to learn delegation, not delegation, but I had to learn that time management thing. I had to learn that my work can be put on hold for a second. Somebody else is just learning and they need help. And I know when I was in their position, it bothered me greatly when nobody would answer me for anything. And especially a coding question. Oh my word. If you've got a coding question, you need that answer right now, because it's going to dictate what code you put on something. And if I had not done that, like I said, it would have put her on hold, then I would have been on hold. And it snowballs from that. If you're in a team like we are, trying to meet a certain goal for a day, knowing that I was a kink in it, that's pretty bad. I would feel bad. So like I said, I think this young lady, she keeps coming back to me. So she trusts me and she knows that she can depend on me. And that's kind of, that's rewarding in and of itself, even though it may not affect the whole team. It's very rewarding for me being depended on, and I can meet that, and we can all be successful for that day.
A few points of that story, Dee, actually really reminded me. I just wrapped up Signature Reads, our annual reading program that various associates throughout the company participate in. And
Okay.
the book I read was actually Wired to Connect by Dr. Britt Andriotta. And what you said was actually sort of would be a great case study for her book. But it's, how a teamwork, how you connect as a team, how you grow as a team, how you reach peak performance as a team. So what you were saying about helping that new coder out and learning some things about yourself, the author actually talks a bit about what a group needs to go through to feel safe, to feel belong, to feel like they have purpose. All things that you sort of touched on with, bringing this person in, making sure they're doing their best work, and then all of you succeeding together. And reminds me, one of the biggest points from the book was to have a team at peak performance. Every member of that team needs to be at peak performance. Mm-hmm. So you might have a team that, they feel comfortable with each other, they know what the work is, they're at that performance level. But then when you bring in a new person, like this new coder you mentioned, that team is not back to peak performance until this new person feels comfortable, can do the work, can achieve at the same levels you guys are achieving. So you pretty much did an entire case study of this book with that story. And I did not prompt you. I did not prompt you to do that at all. So if we have anybody interested in reading that book, I highly recommend reaching out to our learning team, our instructional design team, and they can hook you up with checking that book out of the library. So thank you, Dee. That was a wonderful answer. And again, quite a few of your answers have really sold our coding team. So if anybody's listening to this and they're considering a career in coding or joining Signature, like, I don't think Dee could have been a better spokesperson than she's been so far.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Next question. What impact do you aspire to, I'm going to say, continue making within the organization and with the people you directly work with?
Like I touched on before about getting that quality incentive every quarter. If you reach that, that's okay. That's pretty good. But you have to be constantly in that mode of being and thinking, okay, am I doing this right? Am I being productive? Do I need to go on and do something else and then come back to it? I think I personally aspire to be better than I was yesterday. And like I told you earlier, like there's some days that I can code 20, 30 charts. And the next day, 5. And so that third day, you're like, okay, I need to get beyond this so I can feel like I'm succeeding at being a part of my team. With that mindset, that helps your company. I think it helps Signature, because if I'm doing my best at all times, like you had said, peak, then that's going to impact Signature tremendously. It impacts how they present themselves to community as at large, especially if you're looking for new clients. They're going to look at that. Okay, how are your employees working? Are they doing the best that they can do? Is there room for improvement? Do they lack something? Because believe it or not, they look for that. I know when I worked for the VA and I had to hire a contract coding company, those were things I looked at. Okay, how long were those coders there? Have they done anything to improve their position? In other words, have they taken any additional coding credentials? Are they, whatever they're doing, are they striving to be better than they were yesterday? And I think I try to be. It may not be, going and taking another credential, but I want to be better than I did yesterday. And I think with that constant mindset, I think you will aspire and reach those goals that you have set for yourself, whatever they may be. And ultimately, that does impact the company you're working for. For us, it's Signature. And you just want to make sure you have a good example to your community that you're trying to receive work from. So that's that one anyway.
Dee, how do you see your role positively affecting the world outside of Signature?
For one thing, like we had kind of touched on earlier about statistics, coding helps the statistics roles. That's a pretty big thing, because there's a lot of people that go and do research, and they go to these contract companies, they go to the hospitals and they say, hey, we're doing a study on cardiovascular disease. We're doing a study on trauma, in a specific trauma, like how many people have motorcycle accidents and things like that. If I don't code it right, then that's not going to be right. That, first of all, not going to be right for Signature, but then for the greater common good out there, outside of Signature, it's going to mess with their statistics. It's going to mess up with their research. It also we impact reimbursement and how they come up with those fees for reimbursement. It depends on coding and how you can get reimbursed based on the severity of the disease process. Inpatient is notorious for that. Inpatient, if you got a patient that's in there that you think is only supposed to be there for 5 days, and they end up being there for 20 days, you got to step back and go, why? What changed? Because the last guy, he was only in here for 5 days. What changed? And that coding is a big component of that. A lot of outside companies, a lot of outside hospitals, they look to other people. They look to other companies and hospitals and say, what did you do for that? What's your disease index on that? How do you come up with your length of stay and your resources? How do you allocate those? So, just because we're just one part of the whole HIM environment, we all look to each other. We all look to each other's, and if we don't do what we're doing, we're not going to have a positive result. It just won't happen, and everything will be skewed. It'll be all messed up, and the world's going to end because some doctor didn't say it right on his dictation. But anyway, it's just, I think we're just one part of a bigger picture. When they come and they perform performance measures, hospitals have performance measures and they get graded on those performance measures. The performance measures is one of those things, is your length of stay. They look at your length of stay and want to know, like I said earlier, why is it taking you to get this person better? What's going on? Is it the facility's problem? Is it the patient's problem? And sometimes it could be the coder. They coded it wrong. And unfortunately, that does have that has a negative effect. But I think all in all, as you strive to be better and as you approach the struggles like with ICD-10, that the codes change every year. CPT, which is the procedural coding for the outpatient, that changes every year. If you don't keep abreast of it and you don't, meet that demand to know that kind of information ahead of time, you're not going to have a positive impact, because you're going to be putting data out there that is wrong. That just, like I said, it has a snowball effect. If you use a wrong code, it just snowballs for everybody, for researchers, for insurance companies, for the hospitals, the doctors, they kind of like being paid, and they like being paid accurately.
Dee, I think you did a really good job of demonstrating how every facet of the healthcare cycle is affected by making sure that these codes are properly stated. With your years in the coding profession, and we talked a bit about you helping some newer coders and bringing everybody up to speed and stuff. If somebody was looking to pursue a coding career, what advice would you have for them?
Oh, that's a good one, because I've had a lot of people come to me and ask me, how do you do it? My sister, for one. And I usually tell them, I was like, there's prerequisites to be a coder. You need to have anatomy, physiology, pharmacology, and all that. And I said, you can't get around that. And as soon as I say anatomy and physiology, they're like, oh, Lord, this is not for me. But I usually, of course, I'm partial to my organization, which is AHIMA, AHIMA. But our other coders work for CPC, or AAPC rather. And they each have different criteria, they have different credentials, but they all have a fundamental educational slice. And it kind of depends on what you really want to do and how much you want to invest in it. You can take those basic classes and just get a coding credential and you're on your way. AHIMA does not allow you to get your coding credential just off the street. You have to get those classes behind you, and then you have to work in it for a year, then you have to re-examine and all that. So it's at least a 2-year process. I think AAPC is like that too, because my sister is approaching that one because she doesn't want to go to school. She's like, I am not going to college. And I was like, well, I hate to tell you this, but you're going to have to take an anatomy, physiology. And so she did. But hers, she can achieve her goal within a year. So it kind of just depends. And it also depends on what you want to do afterwards. A lot of people, when I first started out in school, I did not want to be a coder. I said, oh, ho, no, I am never going to be a coder. And guess what I've been doing for the last almost 20 years? I think I want to be in medical records. I want to be working with the doctors and things. And anyway, so your role changes. What you want to do changes. It took my sister sitting in an x-rays physician's office, seeing that the coder was getting paid more than she was, but she knew a little bit about what that other coder was doing. And she's like, well, why don't I just do it? I was like, I told you that 10 years ago. That person first needs to know what they want to do, what kind of investment they want to put into it, and also realize that it's not going to be easy. You're gonna have to make some sacrifices. But I enjoy telling people. I know that I've done this in the past with some other people that they go to my church and they're like, well, how do you do what you do? And I'll write up this big Word document saying, well, you need to go look at this particular organization, look at this organization. This is what they require you to do. This other one requires you to do this. And so you pick and choose. And unfortunately, a lot of them, they choose not to. I think it's because the dedication, people's mindset is being a coder is easy. And it's not easy. It's not easy. It's just not. My sister learned that, she's like, oh, okay. But yeah, almost 200,000 codes. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
No, medical coding can be a very comfortable career. But it does take work to memorize all that. And again, I think I'd be fine with anatomy and physiology. It's the pharmacology that I think.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I can do rote memorization of muscle groups and everything else, but I think the chemistry and the interactions, I think, would drive me crazy. So,
I hear you.
Yeah.
I do a lot of AI lookups.
And verify.
You
want to verify the pharmacology. Dee, I really want to thank you. This has been a really insightful conversation. You've had a lot of really inspirational, explanatory statements that I think hopefully have made things clearer for people who want to know what it is like to hold the job of medical coder. We didn't quite go into difference between inpatient, outpatient trauma. I mean, there's just so much to talk about. I probably have you on again if you would like to. But I just want to say thank you so much for, stopping by today and being a guest on the podcast.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. And thank you to all our listeners. We will see you next time when we go on the job with.